All right, we're good to go.
My very small task but very honoured job tonight, if we want to put it that way, is first of all to welcome all of you, and also of course to welcome Damien. It's been a long time coming, but we're here. We're in a book event at Dymocks, and that's a fantastic thing to see. We're excited, so I hope you all are too. It's been, what am I going to say, about 3 years now, Damien, since we first crossed paths, reading Pratchett and, doing exciting things like that. And I think actually we met first at an event, so it's actually really nice to have you back being the star, which of course he is. So I'll just check first of all that you can all hear nice and clearly. And obviously I'm going to have to change this as soon as you step up here. But I'd like you all please to show your appreciation for our very dear friend Damien Perry.
Can everybody hear me? Yes. Yeah, I think we're good. All right. Well, thank you firstly for everybody for turning up. The whole point of being a writer is that you don't have to actually talk to people in real life. You need to just read the books and that's the end of it. But here I am. And as Louise said, it's been a long time in coming, and it's been 3 years since I met Louise, but this goes back a lot further than that. So basically, many years ago, I went to Japan in 2001, and before that, so it must have been 1999, 2000, I went to a psychic, and got a reading, and she was pretty spot on about a few things. So she told me that if I ever got onto a motorcycle, I would die, and this was the day before we went for our motorcycle licenses, so I just went out and cancelled that. She told me that I was going to see my brother for Christmas, and I go, no, I'm pretty sure not, because he's up off in the country somewhere, and a couple of days later he rang up and said he was coming down. And then she saw a necklace around my head with a little wooden wizard, and she said, you're going to publish a book about those. That was 1999. I took it seriously. I had a notebook at home with the outline for a novel called Dwarves in Space, or Don't Stop the World, I Want to Get Back On. And many people have tried to stop me from calling it that over the years, so it ended up being Dwarves in Space. It was probably a self-fulfilling prophecy, but knowing that I was going to publish this book gave me the impetus to finish it. I worked from 8 o'clock until midday every weekday when I was in Japan. Just sitting in a coffee house, drinking coffee, knocking out book after book of Dwarves in Space, and little 100 yen notebooks with dodgy paper and bright pink and blue covers, and I've got about 10 of those at home from filling out this book. After a year of writing in Japan and finishing it off back in Melbourne, I finished the book finally, and now, that was 2001. 13 years later, here I am. Good old fortune telling. I've had Dwarves in Space edited, I've had it proofread, I've had it professionally assessed, I've sent it to numerous publishers, I've sent it to half a dozen agents. Every time I submit it to an agent or a publisher, they say, you'll wait for 3 months. Thank you for your interest. If you haven't heard back from us in 3 months, then we probably don't want your work. So, after a couple of years of 3-month waiting stints, I decided that if I was ever going to get published, or get published before I was 40, I was going to have to do it myself. And so here I am, and here we are. And I've got to thank a few people, especially Pippa, who sat there reading and rereading and rereading different sections of the novel with a red pen in hand, passing me page, and I would fix it up and make a couple of other mistakes at the same time. And it says it in the acknowledgements at the end of the book, but her big contributions, and the thing was stopping me from killing the dragon. Because the women don't want to read about a dragon dying, and there's no reason why the dragon should die, so you can't kill the dragon. So I didn't kill the dragon until the last page of the novel, which I've just realised as I've gone back reading it again, going, oh, yeah, killed the dragon. In a throwaway joke right at the end of the book. So thank you, Pippa, and I'm sorry I ignored all of your advice. So thank you for everybody for coming tonight. I mean, for a lot of you here, it's either the last day of term, or the last day of term for some of your kids, or the last day of term for yourself. But I'm going to try and make it worth it for you. I'm going to read out a couple of passages from Dwarves in Space itself, done with suitably terrible accents. Then I'll read out a section from one of the short stories making up the second book of Tremador, which is short stories set in the same world. So basically the first book finishes, and I started writing my second novel, and I set my second novel 150 years in the future, which basically meant that a lot of the characters were going to be dead. I realised that might annoy some people, so I'm filling in the gaps, and that's going to be the next series of books. I'm about 3 or 4 books through that now, so hopefully about halfway through next year, expect some more. Except for those people here tonight who can get some now. Again, with suitably bad accents. Just out of interest, I wrote most of the first novel in Japan in a little cafe called Dwarves, which is a German coffee cafe. The second novel I started in a lovely little cafe called Dymocks, which I probably pronounced wrong in suitably bad accents. This was the cafe where Hemingway used to write when he was in Paris. So I went, when I was in Paris, I went specifically to this cafe, hoping that the news would come off. So again, a lot of black coffee, and this time the spirit of Hemingway got me going, and I hope you like it. Alright, so I'm going to read our passage from Dwarves in Space. For those people who have no idea what the novel is, basically it is set on a world run by a computer that was designed as a pleasure world for people to come and visit and pretend to be barbarians for today and slay the dragon and all that sort of stuff. And then it was ignored and abandoned for hundreds of years, in which time the people on the planet gained sentience and started up their own little civilization. And so the world was created and written by incredibly bad science fiction authors who were very derivative because it made it easier. And the world built on itself from there. They all became self-aware, and then one day a spaceship crashed into the planet of barbarians, elves, dwarves and wizards, and changed everything forever. And now the crew of the spaceship are now travelling around the galaxy trying to save Tremador from destruction. But as I said, it's a bit derivative. Things are happening in the background. So what I've got here is a little bit where Brendan the Terrible, who was so named because he was born Brendan, and after beating up a few people thought he needed to add something to the end of his name, and Rolf Brickskull, whose intelligence level will sort of indicate why he was named so later on, talking about the quest that they're going on and why that quest is happening and why it's working. So this whole questing thing is ridiculous, Brendan growled. We're off on a wonderful quest to save good from evil. It really makes you despair about the free will idea. No idea what you're talking about. Rolf Brickskull hefted a practice sword they were using during a break from ship flying. Now look at it. We're in a struggle of good and evil. Evil starts to win. A really great spaceship falls out of the sky, and now a nicely selected group of wizards, warriors, dwarves and elves are flying between the worlds looking for the ultimate weapon for good. I mean, this happens all the time. What? Magical artifacts from the stars landing in the middle of the battlefield? You know what I mean. Insurmountable odds, unusual adventures. I just hope I'm one of the heroes alive at the end and not the dying for a noble cause fellow. And the free will. You know, well, we've got to win, don't we? There'll be an almighty battle, we'll lose hope, and out of the darkness will come the one, the brave soul who will lead us to victory. Yeah, Roland. Hang on, said Rolf Brickskull thoughtfully. What about Simon the Invincible? He lost a great battle between good and evil just last week. Well, sure, said Brendan, parrying a clever thrust from his opponent. He was the evil one. That's not what he said. Well, he wouldn't, would he? Brendan got around Rolf's defences and flicked the sword out of his grasp. I suppose not, said Rolf, holding up one hand to pause while he picked up his sword. So, how do you know we're the good guys? Look at the makeup of our group. Wizards, benevolent, warriors, noble, dwarves, clever and loyal. Clearly, all good. No, okay. Rolf pondered this and Brendan the Terrible went on. You know, I could be that great leader. You're kidding. No, think about it. We find this prophecy, albeit one of, what's his name, the confused, that goes as follows. His mind knows no parents, but without that, he will save the kingdom of Tremador. He flies without wings, and so on and so on and so on. Is that really what it says? I don't know, something like that. Anyway, I don't know who my parents are. Sure you do. Your dad's Hal Woodman, and your mum was a sheep. Rolf burst into laughter with his perceived criticism. Nah, my point is, maybe I was adopted. Maybe I'll be the great leader who takes on my dad in a great battle. Now you've lost me. It'll be Brendan the Terrible versus Hal the Evil Carpenter. No, my real dad, the evil overlord who sired me, his bastard son, that I can agree with, his bastard son with untapped powers who will rally the peasants against the evil hordes. Brendan struck a heroic pose, and Rolf struck Brendan in the stomach with his fist. I still don't get it, Rolf said, as Brendan bent over, winded. Don't tell me you haven't noticed. Last year, the great Derek, bastard son of Princess Sheila and Dark Lord Graham, brought up in a stable, finds the magic sword, is forced to lead the local boys' fire brigade, suddenly discovers all these magical powers. Next thing you know, he's wrested the kingdom from the dying king and battles his father in a war that lasted all 3 days. Yeah, I remember that. I lost 10 gold pieces betting on the bad guy. Well then, you're not paying attention. The bad guy never wins. Fred the Conqueror versus Supreme Advisor Harold. Fred kicked the butt. Joan of Door? Window. It was Joan of Window. Actually, I think it was Arch. Anyway, Joan of Arch took on the evil hag Queen Barbara, and Queen Barb ended up taking a dive out a window. When you're pitting good against evil, good wins 9 times out of 10. Brendan hefted his training sword and swung it round his head. Righto then, if I'm going to take on the world, we should get back to training. Rolf sighed and tossed his sword into the corner. Yeah, for the goddamn flying metal barrel. And they go back to their simulators and start learning how to fly the ship again. That's it, thank you. So that's basically the story of Dwarves in space, told by 2 idiots with swords in a training simulator. And that goes on, and then all sorts of things happen, and there is a great battle between good and evil, and spoilers, no. I think you can guess what happens at the end. And then book 2 starts 150 years later with a lot of dead people, so I wrote a short story to sort of link it, and a number of other short stories to link that. Which turned into another book. today, for the first time, unedited by Pippa. So, forgive me. I'm just going to read the little bit that I put together as Terwilliger, Bartleby's brother, captains the Eagle on the further voyages of Tremador and the Starship Eagle. Terwilliger, captain of the Eagle, is suffering an existential crisis. He doesn't know why anybody would consider him to be the captain of the ship. So this is me trying to figure out in my own mind why anybody would consider him to be captain of the ship. And what I'm going to do is just read you through a little bit more of an action-packed sequence that happens on the Eagle in the very first couple of days of Terry taking control of the starship. So, there was a ping from the captain's communicator, and Aggie's voice came out. Ah, Captain! One of the artificial reality beasties has escaped somehow. Over the crashing and screaming, Daffod's voice could be heard. I didn't ken it was a rule. Thought it was more of a guideline. Anyway, duck, you fool! It has killed 2 of the security barbarians, and I think I can smell the plants. I think it can smell the plants in the arboretum. Run our way, Terry said, dashing up the stairs, followed closely by Sings. Adrenaline flooded his system, and he was smiling as he jogged towards the elevator. This, he said. Captain, asked Sings. This is why we're on the Eagle. It's the thrill of being killed by something absolutely new. Sings smiled at him. This was not news to the perceptive old elf. Let's boldly go then, eh? Terry said as the lift hummed to a halt. By the way, what's artificial reality? Nearly real? As the door began to open, a massive clawed fist punched through the metal and lodged there, kicked sticking the doors shut. The screech of pain from the whatever on the other side of the door was a mixture of wildcat and gorilla. There was a simultaneous chorus of laser fire and a chuck of axes bouncing off heavy scales. That's really real for a nearly real monster, Terry said, dropping to the ground to escape the strafing claws. Sings pressed back against the far wall of the elevator. The creature was trying to pull free, succeeding only in stripping scales and flesh from its wrist, and from the sounds of the thrashing and noises outside, making it even more furious. Through the screams, Terry could hear Aggie shouting orders at the security crew. She had a commanding, authoritative voice, but she had no sense of tactics in battle. You with the axe! Hit it again! Ooh, that must hurt. Through the axes in the torn metal, Terry shouted, We've got a good grip on it from this side, Aggie. Finish it off for us if you don't mind. Aggie gave a yelp of happiness. Glad you could join us, Captain, she said. Hold on a wee moment. I'll have you out of there barely. There was a cry and a receding yell, followed by the thump of a body hitting a wall. Maybe a touch longer. Blood sprayed from the creature's wrist with every wrench of its arm. Sings, still upright, but pressed far against the far wall of the lift, noticed that as the blood hit the floor and walls, its shape became blocky and it faded away completely, leaving no residue on the surfaces. Rubbing the side of his nose, he reached into a pocket in his tunic and pulled out a small device from amongst the multitude of small devices. He frowned, put it back, and withdrew a very similar device. Better, he said. Terry, whose shirt had been snared in a claw as the beast whipped its injured hands around in the confined space, snorted. Better, he gasped, trying to manicure the claw with his dagger. One moment, wait. Sings slid a couple of sliders and twiddled a knob. Terry was now straddling the hand, chopping at the exposed flesh of its wrist and trying not to fall off. Sings, he shouted. The elf lifted the tablet-shaped box and tapped a button. A beam of light shot from the end of the device and hit the claw, Where it struck, the creature disintegrated, pixelizing and dispersing like salt escaped from a shredded bag. The light passed through this torrent, through the ruined door, and into the rest of the creature. Terry rode the disintegrating claw to the ground, through the beam, without disintegrating luckily, and landing in a crouch like the accomplished burglar that he was. He peered through the child-sized hole in the lift door to see the strewn wreckage of his security detail lying in various prone positions on the floor. "Everybody okay?" he called. There was a chorus of pained moans in the affirmative. Aggie crawled out from under a burly barbarian. "Well, that was unexpected," she said. Daffod carried the AR module sheepishly up to the airlock. I cannot tell you how sorry I am," he said. Terry just stared at him, arms crossed, and waited. Daffod placed the module into the airlock, pressed a button to close the hatch, and after a few seconds for the locks to seal, opened the outer doors. The artificial reality module tumbled off into space. Dejected, Daffod shuffled back to the others, standing with Aggie between him and the captain. Yoshi was sulking. "It was a perfectly good unit," he grumbled as the crew heads made their way to the meeting room. "It malfunctioned, creating a monster that killed 2 of the crew in an incredibly implausible fashion and rampaged through the ship. Just because it isn't dwarf-proof doesn't make it faulty," said Yoshi, glaring at Daffod. What skin could be seen through Daffod's beard turned red. "I can't even begin to list what was wrong with that machine from a design point of view," Singh said. They entered the meeting room and sat down. Yoshi started loading the daily briefing. "How about," said Terry, "being able to create a giant monster, not being able to turn off the monster? The machine not having a safety option to stop monsters killing the crew? I understand it. The monster was controlled by the ship computer, which means that the ship is now killing our crew without need of demons or trolls or zombies." Sings nodded. "Finally," Terry said, "the machine is meant to be limited to one room set up to create these images, and yet this lizard thing just strolled out without any reason for being able to do so." Yoshi mumbled something about power surges and safety protocols, but Terry was having none of it. "Rubbish," he said. "It was a ridiculous situation, so I got rid of it. Imagine if that happened 2 or 3 times a year." And thank you very much. Not in the slightest taking a Mickey out of Star Trek there once, I don't know. Especially not Star Trek The Next Generation. Okay, so you've heard something that nobody else has heard before. You've heard something that quite a few have already read before. I have very little left to say, so I'm going to open the floor to questions from anybody who wants to ask some. Mitch!
What's it like to self-publish?
Self-publishing is only marginally, it wasn't fun, but it means that I've now sold more than 200 copies of a book that wouldn't be out there otherwise. I managed every step of the thing. I created the cover, I wrote the blurb, I sent it off through Lulu, which was a really easy way of publishing it, but as Louise has said, it's not the best way to publish if you actually want any bookstore ever to buy it.
I don't think I said it.
No, you didn't say that. That's been the way. Yeah. Basically, any of the big bookstores, I've been really lucky with Dymocks, but I've also had a lot of people saying they won't buy it because they can't buy it from Lulu because they're not allowed to return it. It's incredibly satisfying the moment that book turned up on my doorstep and I could pick it up and open it up and say, I created this, and that was phenomenal, and that was well worth it. But it doesn't make up for having a professional team of editors who would probably, cut a goodly amount of dwarfs and space out of it for being overly wordy or completely derivative. It's what's there is my writing and all me, and I take ownership for it, and I also take the blame for it. And the people who've read it have enjoyed it. But yeah, I think from a self-publishing point of view, there's a trade-off in that it's either all yours, all the blame and all the glory, or it's a lot more professional with the professional editors and the professional graphic designers and all that sort of stuff. And the professional marketing. I think that's been the biggest thing as a self-publisher is marketing and getting it out in front of people. And again, for which I am grateful to Louise for allowing me this opportunity. Go for it.
I'd like to know who of your friends features in with cameo roles or inspiration for main characters.
Tell you what, if you someone holds up the cover and then turns it to the back and then looks slowly around the room at someone who may or may not be wearing glasses at the moment, hiding behind a video camera. I have. I'm most of the way through writing another book which is set in the real world and which draws heavily on a goodly number of different people who may or may not sue me when I publish it. But this one is very much really the characters are more characters that have always been in my head rather than characters that are based on anybody that I actually know. I can't tell you that. That's the ultimate inspiration.
Where does the next book start?
Alright, so the second book starts...
Without spoilers.
Okay, the second book starts 150 years in the future, which sets us up for the people from Earth finally getting to Trimmadora and setting up for a major conflict between the people of Earth and the different cultures from the Trimmadorian galaxy. Because of the big difference there, then before that comes out, I'm going to release short stuff, Dwarves in Space 2, which will have, again, a better, less cheesy name. Which is just a series of short stories that link up the first book to the second book with, and tie off some of the stories that, for pacing reasons, I just didn't want in Dwarves in Space, but they're stories that still need to be told. So this is part of it, and the whole lead up into how the second book starts is another part of it. And the whole concept of the red suited ensign is going to come into it as well.
What happens to Kirk?
Crick.
Crick.
Crick is an orc who was a spy for the necromancer who got caught and ended up being the ship's chef, and everything that she cooked tasted like chicken. Chicken. Not anything else at all, because trolls like eating human flesh, and there wasn't always human flesh to be had, so Crick had to learn how to make anything taste like chicken. She, at the end of, she's got a much bigger role in the short story series. That she's become a lot stronger of a character and really has taken to the whole concept of flying the ship. No matter how little everybody else she knows wants her to fly the ship, because of her basic lack of ability, it's something that she really, really wants to do and tries to do at every possible access, at every possible point whatsoever.
Which was your most favourite character, and which was the easiest to write?
Bartleby just was a character that was not a hero, but so easy to write because of his personality, his the way that he cared for everybody that he knew, but he also had a really laid-back personality. So he was very easy to write because he just rolled off the tongue. The other ones that I really enjoyed writing were Rolf and Brendan, because they have conversations that, and I don't like saying this, but they still make me laugh out loud when I'm reading them, which is a little bit conceited, but you know, some bits that I really enjoy from the story, and a lot of the bits that I really enjoy from the story is watching those two play off against each other, and the way that they're so basically brutal towards each other, but they still love each other.
Damien, some authors say that stories write themselves and they really just get dragged along, but there are other authors that say they have to enact it out from start to finish so that they actually know where it is they're working towards. Do you think your method is?
I wrote a 5-page document outlining each and every one of the things that was going to happen in Dwarves in Space back in 1999, 2000. I've still got it on the hard drive. About a quarter of that actually happened once I started writing it. Aggie was never meant to get on the ship. She was always going to stay behind because she felt betrayed by the whole situation. And once I started writing, she just decided that she was going to stay on the ship, and she stayed on the ship. There was a couple of major characters that stayed dead for about 5 years that ended up coming back to life in strange and weird ways. Not that you can tell from the story, it's just that they wrote themselves back into the story. One character who was meant to have a major plot line was the cleric, Elder Brown. And when I finished the novel, I realised that he was in the 1 page at the start of the novel, and so I just had him walk out of the ship at the end going, when everybody just ignored me for the entire thing. And a lot of the stuff, there were meant to be a lot more wizards involved, and there ended up being only the one on the ship, and so I was meant to be a lot more Star Trekky with the power structures and stuff like that, which abandoned itself quite quickly once I figured out who the characters were and how they interacted with each other. It made it easier for me to abandon a lot of the cliched stuff and go into something a little bit more original. But don't fret, there's still plenty of cliched stuff in there.
So what kind of bearing is that going to have on you as you progress with the second book?
There was a bit of tweaking. I knew what was going to happen in the second and the third book, and that's still going to happen, but it'll happen with very different characters than what I'd originally planned. So, as I said, the second book is going to be the struggle between Earth and Troubadour, and the third book was Troubadour taking that struggle back to Earth. So that's the huge, overwhelming story arc, and that'll still happen. How it happens, again, once I start writing and figure out what I want to do, I've already surprised myself a couple of times just in the first couple of pages of the new novel. So there'll be some big changes as it goes along, but I'm hoping that the overall arc is still going to happen.
How far advanced are you with your other novels today?
I started a blog, findingdamo.com, and I started that blog to be a companion to the book that I was writing called Finding Damo, which has got a picture of a cat eating a goldfish on the cover, and that was my homage to my 30s. As I turned 40, it's getting further and further away and harder to identify with the character. But that one's about 3/4 of the way done, but the more I write about it, the more I realise that I could never publish it and still keep working as a Catholic school teacher. So when a publisher picks up Dwarves in Space and I no longer have to work for a living, then you might see Dwarves in Space, you might see Finding Damo following that. I'm 4 stories into short stuff, which is the short story collection, and I am about 100 pages into Dwarves in Space 2, whatever that will end up being called. On top of that, it's just maintaining the blog and doing everything else that I do in my day-to-day life. So. Oh, well that. Oh, Mitch.
Is there any way particular people find it easier to write, or?
Yeah, it's really strange, but I do most of my writing on the train heading into the city and out of the city. I take a notebook with me, I put headphones in and just play white noise. I sit on the train and I'll write for an hour on the way in, and then I'll write for an hour on the way out. I still write a lot in coffee shops, and as good as the coffee shops are around Melbourne, I still prefer to write in Starbucks. It might be the sugar. So yeah, but strangely enough, I get a stupid amount of work done on public transport, which freaks people out when they see when they hear about the fact that I'm riding on a train with people packed in on all sides. But I find it easier to tune out that way than I do in a specific riding spot where anything else, if it's completely silent, I find that I'm distracted more than when I'm surrounded by noise, and I can just tune that out. Except, like the last time I went into the city to try and write, and if you've read Finding January, you might notice that there was this crazy conspiracy theories woman who sat down across from me and started talking to me and talked to me for the next 30 minutes. So that turned, I ended up writing a blog instead of writing Dwarves in Space on that day, because that was incredibly interesting. So that's the other thing that happens when you're on a train.
What's it like being 40? I don't know.
Well, I'm pretty sure you're the expert. You there and that over there. Yes, and that was the other thing. The other reason for self-publishing was I need to be published before I'm 40, and now I've done it. All right, so that I think is about all for me, and I'll say thank you very much for turning up. And I am going to be sitting over there, and if you want to bring me a book, and I can write pithy things in it, or pissy things if you're annoying me. And come over and say hello and ask questions, and please, I've got dozens of bottles of wine over there that need to be drunk. Lots of snacks and foods, and more hiding under the counter for when that's gone. So please get in, dig in, head over and enjoy yourselves. Thank you very much.
I just need to say a very quick thank you. Damien, thanks for coming along. Thanks for having us as part of your event, and also your birthday celebration. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
There are some copies of Damien's book left on the table at the back of the room. So if you'd like to grab a copy, just head to the register first and you know, throw some money at the people out there. They'll appreciate it. And we're going to put Damien under this very elegant poster that's over on the wall, in case you'd like a photo opportunity. All right, thanks very much, and thank you all for coming this evening.
Hello. Hey, Damo's still recording.